Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Takinia, the Grants Director for the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County. I'm here today with my fabulous staff, Crystal, Kat, and Jesus, and we are going to discuss the General Operating Support Level 2 funding opportunity. A couple of things to keep in mind. This webinar is being recorded. That means that in the near future, there will be a recording of this webinar placed on the council's website. Also, because you have registered for this webinar, you will receive the slide deck as well. If you have any questions about what we are discussing today, feel free to utilize the chat function in Zoom. Please ensure that your question is not targeted to one specific staff person. We need to make sure that all staff can see any questions placed in the chat. Also, keep in mind that my colleagues, Kat and Crystal, will keep an eye on the chat as time permits, but they may not have the time to answer all questions in the chat. I will hang around after the slide presentation is done to answer any leftover questions in the chat that they may not have had the time to respond to. And I'll also give you a few minutes just in case any new questions pop into your brain after you have absorbed all the information we are discussing today. Next slide. We always begin our webinars and public meetings with a land acknowledgement. The Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County acknowledges that we are in Montgomery County, Maryland, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Akahonak, the Assateague, the Piscataway, the Pocomoke, the Shawnee, and Nas-Wawash people. We ask you to join us in acknowledging these communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We realize that land acknowledgements are one very small step in a series of actions that need to occur in order to amplify equity and inclusion. Next slide. Here's what we're discussing today. I will briefly discuss the council's role in our local community. I will cover differences between GOS 1 and GOS 2. We will discuss how all proposals are evaluated. We will also discuss the grant guidelines. You'll hear us say this more than once. Please read the guidelines carefully. While we think it is wonderful that you have made time out of your busy day to attend this webinar, attending the webinar does not replace the requirement of all applicants to read the guidelines. Even if you have applied to this funding opportunity previously, please read the guidelines. We suggest you read the guidelines more than once to ensure that you understand all that is written in the guidelines. And if there are any statements in the guidelines that do not make sense to you, please do not hesitate to reach out to staff. We will discuss the required application materials that are also covered in the guidelines. We'll offer important reminders, and as I previously mentioned, we will answer your questions. Next slide. Here is the mission and the vision for the Arts and Humanities Council. We are delighted to work in such a large, vibrant, creative, diverse locale. Montgomery County, as you probably know, is a very large county. It's the size of Rhode Island. That means it's the size of a small state. And that means that we have a lot of geography to cover. Next slide. We are a public funder. That means that we use public funds given to us by local government to re-grant to a diversity of organizations as well as individual artists and scholars. Keep in mind the following. Montgomery County is beautifully diverse. It's diverse in so many different ways. It's racially and ethnically diverse. There's geography diversity. We have urban, suburban, rural communities. There's economic diversity. So there's a variety of reasons why we feel that it is highly important to center equity and inclusion. It's important to staff from a moral and ethical perspective, but it's also important for the following reasons. We are, again, a public grant maker. We exist to benefit the community as a whole. Also, keep in mind that as a public grant maker, we are aware of historical inequities. We are cognizant of the fact that there are a number of marginalized, oppressed, underserved communities that have not had equal access to public funding, and it's a reality that we aim to rectify. We also want our applicants and grantees to always think about communities that have been historically underrepresented in terms of your audiences, the beneficiaries of your public programs, but also in terms of your staff, board, and volunteers. We always ask that applicants and grantees think about internal diversity as well as external diversity. Always ask yourselves, are there any communities that have mistakenly gotten the impression that they are not welcome when they should know that they are welcome? We have a rather long equity and inclusion statement in our guidelines, in all of our guidelines. It is on the first page intentionally to show a spotlight on how important it is. And our equity and inclusion statement actually spans multiple slides in this presentation. You can move to the next slide. We realize that there are a lot of communities that fall under the umbrella of historically marginalized and underserved. Here's a list here, but know that it is not comprehensive. We try our best to list as many populations as possible, but know that we are aware of the fact that language can change, labels can change. Next slide. We recognize that language is fluid and the intersectional justice movement is redefining terminology regularly. The list that we have in our equity and inclusion statement is not exhaustive and will be updated periodically as language continues to shift over time. Next slide. ADA compliance is highly important. It should not be seen as separate from equity and inclusion. We only have it on a different slide to make this more digestible for you. And in the guidelines, we have it separated just so that it's easier to read in terms of not having one long, super long paragraph. But know that these subjects are interwoven. Now, I'll bring up again that we are a public funder. We are using local taxpayer dollars to redistribute to the community. That means that there should not be any barriers to the public or for the public engaging in your programming. That means that if you receive a grant from us, you are required to only use our funding in spaces that are accessible. So any programs that we support must be held in accessible spaces. This is per the county contract. It is the case with most public funders. It is highly important. There should be no barriers to access for the public. We also want you to think about, again, internal accessibility. Make sure that your staff, board, and volunteers are working in spaces that are accessible as well. Next slide. So here is a really cool visual that gets to what I was describing earlier about the fact that the umbrella of marginalized and underserved communities encompasses a bunch of different communities. And I think that this visual does an awesome job illustrating power and how certain communities have historically had less institutional power than others. This slide was given to us by Leadership Montgomery. Leadership Montgomery has a variety of helpful resources and training opportunities. They also still offer equity and inclusion training, which our staff has participated in. I'm going to give you a moment to take this in, but know that, again, these slides will be sent to you so you can have more time to look at this later. Next slide. I really appreciate this quote. This was also given to us by Leadership Montgomery. Um, we want you to be brave. We know that we are working in a climate that can feel hostile, that may encourage you to disregard diversity, but we are asking you to not take that in, ideally, and at least for our funding use our money to be brave and to try your best to benefit communities that have been underserved. We realize that this can be confusing and challenging in this environment, but we want you to strive to do it anyway. Next slide. We realize that this is a journey. It can be messy. Again, I want us to center bravery. Um, when it comes to addressing historical oppression, current oppression, um, inequities. This is a journey that is not quick. This is not a process that encompasses a quick fix. It could be that your organization engages in certain activities that you thought would have an equitable outcome, and it turns out that it doesn't. It's okay. Try again. Learn from those mistakes. Try a different way to benefit marginalized communities. It takes time to figure out impactful approaches, and there will be slip ups, and that's okay. Next slide. So we have resources on our website to help you navigate this journey. We have DEIA web resources. These are a couple of links, but we have way more resources than just these two that are listed on the slide. Next slide. These are other examples of DEIA resources that we have on our website. If you go to the grants section of the council's website, you click on the hyperlink for grants, you'll see a bunch of boxes. There's a box that says grants resources. And when you click on that, there's a long list of different resources that will help you center DEIA. Next slide. All right. Always remember that we are always happy to pay for any accessibility costs, and that is the case for any of our funding opportunities. And as I mentioned previously, we have ADA resources on our website. Next slide. If you are an applicant that self-identifies as having a disability and you need help completing the application from a disability standpoint, please do not hesitate to reach out to staff. We're happy to help out. Next slide. The purpose of this funding opportunity, we want to encourage an active two-way ongoing relationship with the community. We want to promote stability by providing a base of funding to support operating budgets. Next slide. We want to help ensure diverse arts and humanities experiences for Montgomery County constituents. And we also want to stimulate local support and involvement in the arts and humanities. Next slide. We want to strengthen the scholarly and artistic capabilities of the arts and humanities in Montgomery County and improve or stabilize the infrastructure and effectiveness of organizations that we fund. Next slide. Keep in mind the following. If you are applying to GOS2, you cannot apply to programming and capacity building project grants. That's another funding opportunity that's open right now. You have to pick one or the other. Also, keep in mind that if you are a GOS1 grantee, you also cannot apply for general operating support too. We are delighted about the fact that we received approval from our board to make GOS1 a 2-year funding opportunity. That means that you are locked into a 2-year grant. Those applicants applied last year. received a grant last year and are now still locked in to that grant this fiscal year. You can also keep in mind the following. If you are a GOS 1 or a GOS 2 grantee, you can apply for advancement grants. That funding opportunity is currently open, and there is a advancement grant webinar on our webpage if you are interested in that funding opportunity. Next slide. I'd like to cover some differences between GOS 1 and GOS 2. We find that applicants sometimes are confused about which one will be better for their organization. And I think this is helpful for new applicants to understand, but also if you are a new staff member who is getting to know our funding, hopefully this will help you out. Next slide. All right, so there are some similarities in that both funding opportunities span 2 years of support. Next slide. Also, because the economy is rough, we have eliminated the match requirement for both funding opportunities. Next slide. Now, this is important, folks. There are differences for how the awards are calculated. General Operating Support 2 grants are formula-based awards. I will discuss that formula later on in this presentation. For General Operating Support 1 grants, the maximum amount of funding is $50,000, and the amount that is given to the organization is dependent upon the financial documents submitted and the score. So you're getting 35% of the allowable budget, whichever is lower, and the max is 50,000. I think what a number of applicants and grantees are confused by is that there's the assumption that all organizations should strive to apply for GOS 2 eventually. Um, and I want to dispel that misperception. Programming and capacity building, GOS 1 and GOS 2, are designed to benefit organizations of specific budget sizes. So I want to be clear that if your organization has a smaller budget, don't assume that you will financially benefit from applying to GOS 2. Often organizations with smaller budgets will actually receive a larger award in GOS 1. We've actually, over time, worked with a few organizations that used to apply to GOS 2, organizations that had smaller budgets. We worked with them and suggested that they apply to GOS 1. And those organizations that shifted actually saw an increase in their award because of the size of their budget. The formula is really designed to benefit organizations that have a larger budget, and that is important to keep in mind. Next slide. Staffing requirements are different. This is highly important, folks. For General Operating Support 2, organizations are required to have a full-time paid executive director, CEO, managing director, or comparable position who reports to the board. For General Operating Support 1, we only require one paid employee working a minimum of 5 hours per week. The amount of time the paid employee works is dependent upon how much money the applicant is requesting. If the applicant requests over 25,000, then you're required to have a paid employee working 20 hours per week. You want to think about the following. The more money you receive from the council, the higher the admin burden, the more oversight that we're expecting, which is why we have differing requirements for the amount of staff time that is devoted to managing these grants. I want to mention again, this is public funding. It involves a lot of responsibility. And that's why this is designed in a certain way that the more money you're given from us, the more money we give you, rather, um, more oversight is expected, right? The burden of responsibility will be higher for the organization. Next slide. This is also important because general operating support grants can be rather large in their amounts. We require an audit. Again, the more money you're receiving from the council, the more responsibility is placed on the grantee organization, and it just requires more oversight. So an audit is required for GOS2, and we realize that audits are expensive. If an audit is too expensive for your organization, you need to look at General Operating Support 1. An audit is not required for GOS1. And if you are requesting over 25,000, we only require a financial review. If you decide to submit an audit, that's totally cool, but you don't have to. If an organization is asking for 25,000 or lower, they're not required to submit a financial review or an audit. Next slide. So again, I want to mention that the more money you're receiving from the council, the higher level of scrutiny. You're going to hear a difference in panel review as well, all depending on the amount of money that is on the table. Programming and capacity building project grants, to be clear, is a funding opportunity that is designed for groups, and groups are entities that may not have 501(c)(3) status yet, and organizations that have 501(c)(3) status that have very small budgets. That means that there are just fewer requirements. We don't have specific staff requirements for that category. They are definitely not required to submit a financial review or an audit. And that's intentional because, again, that's a funding opportunity designed for smaller budget grassroots organizations. GOS1, which back in the day used to be called mid-size organizations, it's designed to benefit organizations that are landing somewhere in between in terms of their operating budget size. And again, GOS2 is designed to benefit organizations that have larger budgets. The admin burden is higher. The scrutiny in terms of how proposals are evaluated is higher. The level of responsibility is higher. What we're expecting from these organizations, again, will be higher because they have access to a larger grant. Next slide. Here's the letter of intent deadline, folks. It is today. Please make sure that you do not miss this deadline. There's no negotiation involved here. We can't shift deadlines. We can't accept late letters of intent. Please don't wait until 11:58 to hit the submit button. That is highly risky. Sometimes we get emails from applicants who have done that. We get a sad email or a phone call saying, I hit the submit button at 11:58. I don't understand why my proposal didn't go through. We can't control your tech. You're at home, you have slow internet, you see that little spinning circle on your computer after you've hit the submit button, and then your proposal doesn't go through. That's on you, sadly. Um, while the deadline is 11:59 tonight, know that staff are not working until 11:59 tonight. We're working standard business hours. So that means that if it's 5:30 and you have questions about the LOI, or you're having some tech questions about SM Apply, you're on your own. We've had the templates on our website for a while now. So, good luck if you haven't submitted it yet, but please submit it as soon as possible. Also, keep in mind the following. If you hit the submit button before the deadline, you can still get into SM Apply to make any changes that you need to make. So let's say you hit the submit button at 1 p.m. today, and then you realize, oh, shoot, I forgot to upload all the list of my board members. It's okay. You can still get back into the portal at 1:30, do what you need to do to make that necessary change. But please don't wait until 11:58 to hit the submit button. It's highly risky. Next slide. Here is an overview of how all proposals are evaluated. I talked about the LOI in depth. The LOI is an eligibility check form. My colleague Crystal will talk about it a little bit more soon. After the LOI deadline has passed, staff will review it. If we determine that your organization is not eligible for funding under this opportunity, we will contact you and explain why. If we have determined that your organization is eligible, we will let you know, and then you will have access to the full application in SurveyMonkey Apply. For applicants who know that they're eligible, for applicants who have been applying to this category for quite some time, I want to be clear that there's a full application template on our website. It's been there for a while. Please utilize it. I want you to plan ahead, start figuring out your answers to application questions now. You do not have to wait for us to give you the green light to start the application in SM Apply. You can start preparing now so that when we contact you saying that you can start working on the full application, you already have your answers together, right? So when you have access to the portal, you can just jump in and do your thing. I want to be clear for returning applicants, the application will look very similar in terms of what we're asking from you. The questions will look very similar compared to the application that you submitted 2 years ago. There really aren't any differences, so you shouldn't see any surprises there. When the application deadline passes, staff will do another quick check to make sure all of the activities described in the application are eligible. Normally, that's the case because the LOI form, tends to weed out any applicants who are not eligible. Then we pass all eligible applications to the panel for their review. The panel is comprised of a diverse collective of professionals who have a very strong understanding of the arts and humanities sector. They have a very strong understanding of the nonprofit sector as well. The panel is diverse in terms of their own identity. We always center racial and ethnic diversity, age diversity, the full gender spectrum, sexuality spectrum, even geography in terms of geographic diversity is centered as well. A couple of things to keep in mind about the panel. It is open to eligible applicants. We encourage you to attend. It is a virtual meeting held over Zoom. We want you to attend, but also keep in mind that this is not your time to defend your proposal. That's why it's always good to get your questions to staff in advance, because when the deadline passes, the application has to stand on its own. When we have confirmed the panel meeting date, eligible applicants will receive an email letting them know the date. You'll get the Zoom link, the time frame. You'll also get a code of conduct, and the code of conduct mentions that you are not in dialogue with the panel ever. You're not contacting the panel before, after, or during the meeting. You're just there to listen. If you have any questions, write them down, save them. Staff will be happy to answer your question after award notifications are sent out. I want to dispel a couple of myths about the panel. Sometimes an applicant will hear a person speak during the meeting and they'll get really upset because they don't agree with that one person's analysis. Or maybe it's a couple of panelists that you've heard and you just really don't agree with how they've evaluated your proposal. We center power sharing during this process, and that means one or two panelists cannot decide the fate of your proposal. There are other panelists involved. And also keep in mind that there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So, in addition to the panel, the grants committee and the board also has a say on whether or not an organization receives an award. That means that even if you hear the first person speak about your proposal, sometimes, applicants misunderstand and think that's the lead speaker and that that person has more power over other people in the process. They don't. At the end of the day, when you think about staff, panel, grants committee, board, that's a little over 30 people. And I want to make that clear. So please don't freak out if you hear one person speak and you disagree with them. Remember that there are a lot of other cooks in the kitchen. When the panel meeting is done, staff will forward the panel's recommendations to the grants committee. The grants committee is also a diverse collective of professionals who have a very strong understanding of the arts and humanities sector, as well as nonprofit management. They also center diversity in terms of how they self-identify. And when the grants committee is done with their evaluation, they report to the board. The grants committee will share their recommendations, and the board has the final say over who receives a grant and if there are any declines. When the board is done with their assessment, staff will make public award notifications. You will find out via email whether or not you've been awarded a grant. And then later on, after that process is done, for this funding opportunity, we require one-on-one meetings. And that has to do with the fact that, again, there's more money on the table and additional oversight is required. So you are required to meet with us every year. This is a 2-year funding opportunity, so we will have one-on-one meetings. Um, this August, usually they last late August into early fall, and then the same thing will happen the following year. You'll be required to meet with us if you receive a grant. Next slide. I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague, Crystal, who will discuss the LOI.
Thank you, Takinia. Hello, everyone. This is Crystal Sight speaking, and I'm going to quickly review the letter of intent required materials. I know some of you have already submitted your letter of intent, or LOI for short, but if not, it is due today, as Takinia said, by 11:59 tonight. It should not take long as it's an eligibility check form, but it is required. So be sure to hit the green submit button well before 11:59 tonight. Next slide, please. All right, the required documents for the letter of intent. You need to make sure that you have an arts or humanities focused mission for this opportunity. You will also need your IRS letter of determination, a Montgomery County address, and personnel information for proof of the paid executive director or equivalent that Takinia spoke about earlier. Next slide, please. We will need a list of board members with residency and work addresses. You can provide the city, state, and zip code instead of street addresses if you are more comfortable with that. But we do need those city, state, and zip codes listed with that board member list. We will also need proof of your eligible cash operating expenses and income for the last 3 completed fiscal years. Please note that if you are currently a GOS2 grantee, you will only be asked for your most recent fiscal year because we have your prior ones. Then we will also need a list of programs both in and outside of Montgomery County. Next slide. In terms of applicant eligibility, these are items that need to have been met for the past 3 fiscal years, and that's important to remember. If you are an organization that opened last year or the year before, you are not eligible for this opportunity. Please keep in mind that it has to have been met for all 3 fiscal years by the deadline. So as I mentioned, you have to have an arts and humanities focused mission. Our funding is designated for entities that work in the arts and humanities field. You need to have at least $150,000 for operating budget for both expenses and income, and that's allowable cash expenses and income. We'll get more into that later. You must be governed by a board and have a full-time 35 plus hours paid executive director, CEO, managing director, or comparable position. Next slide. Now we have 2 different categories within GOS2. First, I'm going to speak about applicants that are eligible for the core category. You need to have a primary office and location in Montgomery County. A minimum of 40% of your board members must reside and or work in Montgomery County, and that's where those addresses come into play that we ask for. A minimum of 51% of your programs must take place in Montgomery County. Once again, I know Takinia touched on this. We want to reiterate that this is non-negotiable. We're a public funder that receives money from the local county government, which means our funds are restricted to Montgomery County. And it is a large county. We have a finite amount of funding specifically for the county per government. Next slide, please. We also have an affiliate category within this opportunity. Here are the requirements for affiliates. You must have a local Montgomery County phone number. A minimum of 15% of board members must reside and or work in Montgomery County. You must have a regular season of programming in Montgomery County. And staff must be present on the premises of a core arts and humanities organization for at least 1,000 hours a year, distributed over at least 40 weeks during the year. So, these affiliate organizations are organizations that have in-depth partnerships with core organizations. Importantly, these organizations are able to submit a letter of proof establishing their core partnership with a core organization. So, these are not simply organizations that may have had one or two collaborations last season where you presented a program in Montgomery County with a Montgomery County org. These are in-depth partnerships that exist. If you are confused about this, please reach out to staff. Next slide. In terms of budget requirements, there are items that do not count towards your allowable cash operating expenses. So please keep that in mind when figuring out whether or not your operating budget is eligible for this opportunity. Some non-allowable cash operating expenses include investment fees and interest expenses. Next slide, please. I don't need to read these verbatim. They're all in the guidelines as well. Here are a few more. This is important. So if you do have any questions after reading this in the guidelines, you are welcome to reach out to staff. But again, staff is only working regular business hours today, the day of the LOI deadline. Next slide. This slide is similar, but instead lists the items that do not count towards your allowable cash income. So this is a list of what items are non-allowable in terms of cash operating income. Unrealized gains and losses, in-kind donations, revenue raised for capital. Next slide, please. You must submit the letter of intent first by the deadline of tonight, 11:59 p.m., in order to be eligible to apply for GOS2. Now, make sure you don't miss the deadline. Uh, and one of the key words is that you must submit your LOI by the deadline. And as Takinia mentioned, do not fear the submit button. Next slide, please. After you submit the LOI by tonight, please keep in mind that the full application deadline for GOS2 will be Friday, April 10th at 11:59 p.m. And again, this is non-negotiable. As Takinia mentioned, while the full application is not yet available to you in SM Apply, if you know you will be eligible, please take a look on our website and utilize those templates. Next slide. And I will pass it back to Takinia.
Thank you, Crystal. Let's take a look at the guidelines. Next slide. Keep in mind the following. There are certain activities that we cannot fund through this opportunity. We can't support public, private, or charter schools. We cannot pay for capital improvements, the cost of receptions. You cannot use our funding to purchase property. And again, remember, this is public funding. There should be no barriers to access. We cannot support activities for the exclusive benefit of an organization's members because that is a exclusive activity and not an inclusive activity. Next slide. We also cannot pay for merchandise, your debt. You cannot use our funding for scholarships, awards, or tuition assistance. Definitely do not use our money for political advocacy ever, or any activities that support or promote the interests of any one political party or candidate. And our money must stay in Montgomery County. Do not use our funding to travel outside the United States. Next slide. We also cannot pay for any legal costs incurred with any criminal, civil, or administrative proceeding, losses from other contracts, or the cost of insurance. Next slide. Keep in mind that if you receive an award, the funding must be used for activities that occur starting as early as July 1st, and you should be done with those activities and done with spending the grant by June 30th, 2028. Next slide. Again, we eliminated the match requirement. We sincerely hope that this helps you all navigate a really tough economic climate. Next slide. Let's talk about competitive proposals for a while. We always encourage all applicants to use qualitative and or quantitative data to support your statements. And at this point, for most of the organizations that apply to this funding opportunity, you've been in existence for quite a while. So I'm hopeful that you have access to some sort of qualitative or quantitative data about your constituents, about the communities that you benefit. It shouldn't surprise you to see this statement on the slide that we encourage all applicants to address internal and external DEIA goals and accomplishments. Again, this is highly important. With larger grants, there is more expected of you in terms of impactfully serving our local community. Again, we want you to look honestly at your internal structure and externally how you are serving the community. We want you to be honest. If you are at a point where you know that your organization has a broad mission to serve the community as a whole, you're not an organization that focuses on a specific group. We do fund organizations that may focus on a specific cultural group, but let's say that is not your organization. And you look at your staff board and volunteer representation and you see a lack of diversity. Or it's the flip. You are looking at historically who you have presented in terms of artists or scholars. You're reviewing the audiences, the demographics of people who have attended your public programming, and you see a lack of diversity. You need to tackle this head on. If you provide a statement on your application stating that you serve everyone, but you have no way of proving that you quote unquote serve everyone, if you don't provide a detailed explanation of how this is done, the panel will notice and it could lower your score. So, what I'm getting at is make sure the panel does not think that you are in denial if you are struggling with DEIA. The best way to approach this is to honestly admit that this has been a challenge for you. So if you're struggling with staff board, volunteer diversity, or struggling with how to attract a diverse audience, just be honest about it and plan for how this can be rectified in the near future. As long as you have a plan, then the panel will feel more confident that you can engage in equitable work. But if you appear that you are in denial and you don't have a plan, the panel will be concerned. Next slide. Ask yourself, has your organization clearly described how the organization benefits Montgomery County specifically? And I always bring this up because, particularly for this funding opportunity, we know that a number of the organizations that receive grants for this funding opportunity serve a lot of different geographic areas. It could be that your organization offers public programming in Virginia and DC as well as Maryland. That's great. It's wonderful if you have a wide reach, but keep in mind that, again, we are a public funder specifically for Montgomery County, and we cannot pay for your activities occurring outside of the county. So I would encourage you not to waste space in the proposal and provide detailed explanations about what you're doing in DC and Virginia or other counties in Maryland. You really want to use the space wisely and provide a strong argument for how you have impacted Montgomery County specifically and how you plan to continue to do so in the future. Ask yourself, have you communicated with the demographic that you aim to reach? Please try your best to not make assumptions about any of the communities that you're trying to benefit. We always encourage you to be in dialogue with the communities that you aim to benefit. Next slide. Ask yourself if you have acknowledged and addressed any challenges in the organization's programming or operations. I touched on this a little bit with DEI, but really applies to any aspect of how your organization operates. So I'll give you an example. We know this is a rough economy, folks. We know that a number of organizations were caught off guard when they all of a sudden lost federal grants, as an example. We know there's donor fatigue. We know that there's just a lot of unknowns about our economy and the future. So, if you are an organization that's hit a financial rough patch, which is understandable given all that's going on, there are questions in the application where organizations are required to discuss their financial health, their financial management, and their financial planning. Let's say you're an organization that's hit a rough financial patch. You know, this has been a rough year, both last year and this year for your organization financially, but you decide to provide glowing answers anyway. You write in your application, everything's great. We anticipate that we will triple the amount of funding that we had last year, but you don't have a plan for how that's going to be done. You just claim in your application that you're going to have triple the amount of money next year. This is a hypothetical, folks. I know it sounds extreme, but I'm going to continue with it anyway. So you have flowery statements in your application regarding your financial health, and you have very ambitious fundraising goals. And then the panel looks at the financial documents you've submitted and they see a big deficit. So that's a problem. That's a disconnect, right? So if you know that your organization has been struggling financially, the panel will understand and staff definitely understands as well. The best way to handle this is just to be honest, to be clear about why your organization has struggled financially over the past couple of years. And again, submit a plan for how you can slowly get to a better place of financial health. And importantly, I want to also remind you all that the beautiful thing about general operating support is that you have a lot of flexibility for how you use the funds. You can use it for programming, that's of course allowed. But if you need to use our grant to stabilize, to center capacity, to focus on professional development, strategic planning, working with a consultant to get your organization to a healthier state, there is nothing wrong with that. And you are allowed and encouraged to use our funding for those purposes, particularly during a precarious time that we are all working in. Have you considered partnerships with other organizations? This is not required, but it can be a very smart way to do your work. Very often, working with another organization via a partnership can diversify your audience. You might be exposed to different communities that didn't realize they were welcome to participate in your programming. And it could be a wonderful way to engage in cost sharing. It's a way to share resources during a challenging time. Don't forget to mention any lessons learned from previous work. This is a common mistake. A lot of applicants do not mention lessons learned from previous work, and you will hear the panel say, I don't understand. This organization has been in existence for 30 years. Why are they not bringing up any lessons learned and how it impacts their current work? It's always a smart thing to do. The panel wants to be convinced that you have evaluation installed in your culture and that you are taking an honest look at what works, what doesn't work, and that should always impact any future planning, any future activities you're engaged in. Next slide. Ask yourself, have you considered pay equity? Again, highly important, and this is something that we've noticed over the years the panel really hones in on. So if you're one of those organizations that's having a challenging year financially and you are faced with a scenario of looking at a year of programming where you can't afford to present the same number of programs that you have in the past, but you're going to try to do it anyway and somehow try to figure out a way to pay artists and scholars and your staff a little less compared to previous years, but still do the same amount of programming. Or you've got another scenario that you're looking at where you scale down a bit, where you offer fewer programs so that you can engage in equitable pay. Please go with the example of scaling down and offering fewer programming so that you can equitably pay all that are involved. We would prefer that if you're given a choice between working with fewer people versus a lot of people, if you've got limited funds, please center right sizing. We're going to be clear and that the panel, staff, grants committee board are well aware of the fact that very often people who work in the nonprofit sector are always encouraged to do more with less. That can lead to very unhealthy scenarios. It can lead to instability within the organization. Angry staff who are underpaid will quit abruptly. Artists who feel like they are being exploited will back out on short notice and ruin the reputation of your organization. Don't go there, right? We want to center health, wellness, and pay equity. And again, I mentioned this previously. Please don't hesitate to use our funding for any kind of strategic planning. Right sizing is highly important, particularly in a time that we're working in right now that involves constant change and various different uncertainties. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to try to move through this quickly. I brought up emergency preparedness a couple of years ago, but I want to address it again because we find that a lot of our applicants choose not to use our funding for emergency preparedness, and that's your prerogative. But I will say that I do think it is a smart thing to consider, given again that we are working in precarious times. Next slide. So here's a slide that I'm just sharing for transparency. This is called the Action Roadmap for Arts Agencies. We have been encouraged by organizations that center emergency preparedness. These are service organizations that I'll discuss in a moment, have been encouraging funders to encourage their applicants and grantees to center emergency preparedness. So this has been provided to us in terms of encouraging us to discuss emergency preparedness with the field. Next slide. Think of emergency preparedness holistically. There are various different kinds of emergencies that can occur. Natural emergencies, such as the effects of climate change. This is important for organizations to remember if you present any kind of programming outside. But even if you don't present programming outside, let's say, for example, you are a visual arts organization. You're a historical society. You've got a precious collection in your building. What if a major flood occurs and it damages all of your collection, right? Think about health. I hope that we learned a lot from what we went through during the COVID-19 pandemic. Think about lessons learned from that. Think about technology. Technology changes at the speed of light. And importantly, scammers have gotten very sophisticated. We continue to see an increase in the number of emails we get from applicants and grantees apologizing because they've been hacked. They're spamming going out from their accounts. Please be careful, folks. If your tech is not secure, if your organization is vulnerable to hacking, please use our money to make sure that your tech is secure. If your tech is outdated, you can use our money to buy new tech. You can use our money for professional development to ensure that your staff understands how to use tech wisely. We're all aware of political shifts. There are cultural shifts that go in tandem with political shifts and unstable organizational capacity I already touched on. That should be obvious right now, what I'm getting to with that descriptor on the slide. Next slide. Here's just a visual for how disaster can impact our sector. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Next slide. There are fabulous organizations that can help you with your emergency preparedness plan. These organizations on the slide also offer a variety of other resources. Craft Emergency Relief Fund offers grants, NCAPER and Performing Arts Residence Readiness can also offer consultant recommendations, and they have some really awesome resources on their websites. Next slide. So, performing arts resident readiness, sorry folks, tripping over my words, I've been talking a lot. Performing arts readiness has sample emergency plans on their website. These are very helpful. They've been submitted by a diversity of organizations of different budget sizes. Take a look when you get a chance. Next slide. All of these organizations communicate with each other and work in tandem with each other, which leads to even more of a positive impact for our sector. Next slide. The review criteria is highly important. The evaluative criteria is the roadmap for how evaluators will assess the impact of your proposals. Please make sure that you read how these four criteria are defined. We have detailed definitions for all four evaluative criteria in our guidelines. Please contact us if anything does not make sense in terms of how we've defined these four evaluative criteria. I'm not going to read it out verbatim what we have listed in the guidelines because really everything that we've touched upon to this point is in direct alignment with how the evaluative criteria is defined. And it should not surprise you at this point that community impact has the highest score allotment. That's intentional and is in alignment with everything that we've covered so far in this presentation. Please always think about the evaluative criteria when you're answering any questions in the proposal and when you are choosing your work samples and supplementary materials. Next slide. Please keep in mind the following. We cannot fund any applicants that score below 60. This should not scare you. Normally, applicants that take the time to listen to a webinar, review the guidelines, they start their proposals in advance. Those are normally the applicants that receive a score above 60. But it's something to be mindful of because if you take the risk of starting the day of the deadline and trying to cram everything in, you're rushed, you're stressed, you're not writing clearly. That's a risk that you don't want to take and could lead to an unclear application that scores below 60. So make sure you're not that applicant. Next slide. I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague, Kat.
Hello, this is Kat speaking. Now we'll cover the required application materials, which will reinforce so much of what's already been covered in the guidelines. So let's overview them and get into the details. Next slide, please. There are several different sections to prepare, and all materials must be submitted in our grants portal, SurveyMonkey Apply, also known as SM Apply. And the documents you upload must be PDFs. Work samples can be in a few formats that we'll cover in a few moments, but the other documents must be PDFs. So you'll need to submit answers to narrative questions, materials that support your organization, your finances, and your programming. You'll also need to submit work samples. And lastly, the Arts and Humanities Council reporting data. This is a required form, but the information you provide inside the form is optional. That information is not part of your score at all because it's not shared with the panel. That data is used internally for our donor reports. Next slide. Okay, getting into the details. Even though we're about to look at these materials together, it's important, as has been stated, that you read this section of the guidelines and the application template for even more details about these requirements. Those tools, the guidelines, the application template, are all resources posted on our website to help you get your application ready. We have them as PDF and Word copies, but those document versions are just to help you prepare before you enter information into SM Apply. As a reminder, these slides will be emailed, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on our website. So getting into the requirements for organizational support materials, you will need your EIN, the organization's 9-digit tax ID number. You'll enter that number into SM Apply to complete the 501c3 status check. And you'll need to upload your IRS letter of determination, which may already be on file. You'll provide a list of your board of directors, including their city and zip code. Your members who work and or reside in Montgomery County must be highlighted. You'll also need to share the bios of key staff and volunteers. And you can upload a current strategic plan or an organizational chart if you have them. Next slide. Moving on to financial support materials, you will need to submit either an FY25 audit or a letter of extension stating that you will provide this to AHCMC by June 1st, 2026. Your audit cannot be prepared by a staff member. Only an independent certified public accountant can be your auditor, and this needs to include their report and notes. In SM Apply, there's a fillable chart for the AHCMC budget worksheet, and on the GOS2 webpage, you'll find an Excel sheet template if you'd like to use that to prepare. Next slide. You will either supply your FY25-990 or a letter of extension stating that you will provide it to AHCMC by June 1st, 2026. Next slide. For your most recently completed fiscal year, you'll upload a profit and loss statement and balance sheet. For your current fiscal year, you'll provide your operating budget alongside the actuals year to date. And if available, you can upload your projected FY27 budget. Next slide, please. Next up is programming support materials. This section is where you present to the panel in 5 pages or less and 5 links or less the broader context of what your organization offers to the community. This could be testimonials, reviews of your work, marketing materials, program booklets, photos, brochures, flyers, or examples of similarly successful activities. And those are just some ideas. There's flexibility here because you know your work best. So choose what you think will help the panel evaluate how you program, present, and or produce activities. Just be sure to keep it to 5 or fewer links and pages. Next slide. Moving on to work samples and how many of them you should submit. You should not upload more than 10 samples. Do not provide more than 10 files or 10 pages. If you submit more, the rest will be cut and the panel will only see 10. Feel free to reach out with specific questions if you have them. Next slide. Instead of trying to include everything possible, think like a curator. More isn't always better if it's not clearly related and if it's not a consistent quality. Presenting 5 samples of varying quality levels is not as competitive as 2 high quality relevant samples. And here I'm using quality level to talk not about the work, but to talk about the documentation of the work, the audio quality. Is it easy to hear, or am I having a hard time distinguishing words and sounds from each other? What about the visibility? Is the picture clear and understandable, or is it fuzzy and hard to make out? Quality's better than quantity. So focus on the work that shows your strongest, clearest story of your organization. And if your work is in performing arts or media, it's recommended that you don't submit mostly stills and photos for your samples. It can be hard for the panel to get the strongest sense of those disciplines from a still image, so that's why we encourage audio and video samples for those disciplines in particular. But whatever you decide, please choose 10 or fewer or risk your samples being cut, starting with whatever's uploaded last. Next slide. For images, you can submit them individually or all in one PDF. Just make sure the files meet these size requirements. Those requirements are here and in the guidelines, in the application template, and in SM Applied directly. For written work, it should be double spaced with at least 11-point font and 1-inch margins. It can be larger for sure, but any smaller font sizes and margins will be challenging to read. For audio and video files, the maximum is 4. That's whether you submit all audio, all video, or a mix. Whatever type of file you submit, there can only be 4, and all 4 of those together cannot be any longer than 10 minutes. If you submit more than that, the rest will be cut, and the panel will only see 4 files in 10 minutes. Next slide. Do you have YouTube or Vimeo links? Because if you do, you can enter them directly into SM Apply. Just be sure to use the full link so that feature will work properly in our grants portal. But that's just one option. You could also put those links in a document and upload them as a PDF. Next slide, please. If you're using any sites other than YouTube or Vimeo, you will need to add the hyperlink to a document, make sure the full address is visible, and upload it as a PDF. Now I want to make a note about timestamps, which are a fantastic option. You can indicate the points in an audio and video file where panelists should start and stop. Just make sure the times you call out still do not go over 10 minutes. So you may have a lovely work sample uploaded already that's 22 minutes. That's perfectly fine. Although we're asking for no more than 10 minutes, I want to be clear that we're not asking or requiring you to edit files. That's why you can include timestamps in the question asking you to describe your work samples, or in the PDF that you upload with links, you can write timestamps out there as well. Wherever you choose to place them, clearly including timestamps means you don't have to worry about editing down any files that you submit. Next slide. Always, always, always double check that when someone clicks on the links you've provided, that the full address is visible, that it takes people where you expect it to, and that it is viewable in an incognito browser without a password. It's no fun reading a fascinating work sample description and then clicking on a link to find out it's behind a paywall or a passcode. Sometimes your computer saves all the logins and permissions that are needed to view something, but only you have that information. So double check before you submit. You can email us to test links and confirm. Whatever you do, just be sure that the samples you're excited to provide are actually available to the panel. Next slide, please. If your materials go over the limit, we will cut everything past the maximums. Why do we do this? There's a limit on the work samples and supporting materials because those limits ensure an equitable review process for both applicants and panelists. Putting a clear cap on how long work samples can be helps protect the time needed to fairly evaluate the volume of applications. So those limits help panelists out, which in turn helps you out greatly as an applicant. Panelists are only able to evaluate what is submitted in accordance to the guidelines, which is why it's important to read the guidelines, attend or watch a webinar, which you're doing right now, thank you, and to ask questions. We'll move to the next slide and I'll pass it to Takinia.
Thank you, Kat. Let's discuss award calculations. Next slide. All right, so award calculations. I know this is confusing, so take a deep breath, just listen carefully and reach out later if you have questions. Incorporate each organization's allowable cash expenses and or allowable cash income, whichever is lower, during the past 3 consecutive fiscal years as reported on the applicant's audits. We also take into account the organization's panel score, the total number of applicants who have applied, and by that I should be clear, eligible applicants who have applied, and the public dollars available, and that refers to the county appropriation, which we do not know yet. To be clear, this funding opportunity is for a fiscal year that has not started yet. Next slide. The base award calculation includes the following. We review each organization's allowable cash expenses and or allowable cash income, whichever is lower, again, during the past 3 consecutive fiscal years as reported on the applicant's audit. The 3-year average for each organization is multiplied by the base percentage, and what results from that is the base award. Next slide. Organizations that meet the eligibility requirements for this funding opportunity are awarded a grant that will include a minimum 5% base award. Next slide. Keep in mind that, again, this is a 2-year funding opportunity. That means that the panel will not convene in FY28. The application that you are submitting right now is the application that is needed for 2 years. You don't have to submit another full application the following fiscal year. You only engage in reporting. And the panel score that you receive will cover 2 years, so your school score will be the same for 2 years. Next slide. Grantees are not required to resubmit a full application, as I just mentioned, but you are required to submit reports, included updated financials, that includes an updated audit for FY28. The FY27 and the FY28 award will be the same for both years. If you are granted an award in FY27, then you will receive an award in FY28 as well, and it will be the same amount. Next slide. Okay, I am going to pass it on to Crystal.
So now we have talked through the most of the entire process. You know that the LOI is due tonight. You know what you need for your application when that opens up. You know how the awards are calculated. So now how do you get them? Grant award disbursement. Next slide, please. As noted, grant awards will be announced late in June. And I want to emphasize here that it is late in June. We ask for your patience as we have multiple funding opportunities open at once that we will be announcing all around the same time. So if you have not heard from us on June 15th, for example, please know that we are likely hard at work getting things ready to announce them late in June. And we just want to be transparent about that for your planning purposes. Next slide, please. All right. So once you will receive an award notification via email from us with instructions on what to do next. So you will likely be pointed to SM Apply, where you will see the following: the required grant agreement that you will need to fill out, sign, and submit, the required grant update form, which is new this year, but don't worry, it is a simplistic form just catching us up from the point of application to the award. You will also need to fill out the required bill.com contact form and create a Bill.com account if needed. Our current GOS2 grantees have had previous ones, but this is an opportunity for you to give us any updates about your Bill.com account. Also, you will need to ensure that you have all final reports and any other reports from your previous grants with us in before we can disperse payment. Additionally, any outstanding constituent services fees, this usually speaks to our market power program, that will also need to be paid up. And lastly, but probably most importantly, we as an AHCMC need to have received our payment from Montgomery County government before we can give the funds on to you. So please know that we do not have any control over when we receive the funds from Montgomery County. While we are given our appropriation for the year all at once, that is not when we receive our funds, and we also do not receive them all at once. We receive them in chunks throughout the year. Next slide, please. So we do ask for your patience because we will likely not have the funds by July 1st, which means that you will not have the funds by July 1st. However, the grant cycle does begin July 1st, so you are welcome to pay for whatever you would pay for using our funds and use our funds as a reimbursement. The great thing is, since these are general operating support dollars, they are not tied, as Takinia mentioned, to a specific project or program. So while you may not have the funds at the beginning of the grant cycle, please know that they are indeed coming and that you can use those funds to reimburse yourself. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'm going to pass it back to Kat for a few important reminders.
Thank you. Many of these points were stated earlier, but we're going to talk about some general tips. Next slide. Don't forget on our website, creativemoco.com, when you go to the GOS2 webpage, you'll find templates as Word docs and PDFs that you can use to prepare your application before you enter it into SM Apply. And on that webpage, you'll also find the link for SM Apply, artsandhumanities.smapply.io. Next slide. Something we do not recommend is starting the application on the day you plan to submit and having that day be the deadline day. Not only do you have multiple questions to answer, expenses and income to list out, links and PDFs to prepare, you may have questions for us. So please reach out to us as soon as you can because, friendly reminder, we can't answer questions on deadline days after business hours. So you have until 5:30 p.m. today to get in touch with us with any LOI questions. If you reach out after that, you won't hear back in time. If one of your questions is what type of organizations have been awarded in the past, you can check out our website. The folks we have previously funded are listed there. Please read the instructions in SM Apply carefully as you work on the application. We provide a lot of guidance about what will confuse SM Apply and bring up errors, what will confuse panelists. So please read those instructions. Most of them are in red and bold because they're there to help you with this process. Please read the guidelines and evaluative criteria while you prepare. If you have questions about what the panel is looking for as they read your application, those can be answered by looking at the evaluative criteria, which you can find in the guidelines. Next slide. Write clearly and concisely. Avoid jargon. And if you use an acronym, be sure to list the full term out at least once. Avoid verbose, flowery language and have someone unfamiliar with your work to proofread your application. That can help out tremendously with checking for clarity. Asking someone you trust who hasn't been looking at the application for days on end can help point out where a question wasn't fully answered or where a response is confusing. Next slide. I recommend pulling up the application template and working on the support materials as early as possible. Everything that's required is in the template at the top. It's far too easy to focus on one part of the application and underestimate how long gathering multiple PDFs and information from different websites and formats can actually take. So please try to gather and upload your supplemental materials much sooner rather than later. There's two wonderful learning opportunities Takinia mentioned earlier that I'm excited to remind you about. We invite applicants to attend panel discussions and to request feedback appointments. So after you've submitted a proposal, please know that you're welcome and highly encouraged to hear the panel talk about your application in real time during our virtual panel meeting. And then once grantees are announced, if you're not awarded, you can request a feedback appointment to help you prepare for future applications. If you are awarded a GOS2 grant, you are required to meet with staff in late summer or early fall. Next slide, please. LOI deadline is today, Friday, March 6th at 11:59 p.m. and the application deadline is Friday, April 10th at 11:59 p.m. I hope you remember that cool SM Apply feature that Takinia mentioned that allows you to submit before the deadline and still make edits, like adding something you forgot, switching out uploads, all the way up until the deadline. But what SM Apply can't do is accept any LOIs or applications after the clock strikes midnight on the deadline day. You have to submit before then, and submit is a really important word because the way SM Apply is set up, you can complete everything and forget to hit submit. If you do not hit submit and receive a confirmation email before the deadline, then that means you've missed it, and that's not what any of us want to happen. If you send an application in any form or fashion outside of our online grants portal, we will not be able to do anything with it. Everything must be submitted in SM Apply and on time because the system does not allow for late applications. Next slide, please. We have another video on our resources page. So if you're newer to our grants portal or could use a refresher, there's a webinar about navigating SM Apply. Next slide. Our grants resource page has information about equity, accessibility, legal defense, emergency preparedness, finances, advocacy, and much more. It is not a static site. Kenya mentioned it's updated throughout the year, so please check it out periodically. Next slide. Those were our grant writing tips. Here are some other cool resources outside the grants team that AHCMC offers. We have a website and calendar where you can post events and opportunities for free. CultureSpotMC.com is a fantastic way to plug into what's going on locally and to share what you're presenting and what you're looking for. We also have a paid opportunity to advertise your offerings through Market Power. If you're not already taking advantage of that, you can find more information on our website and by reaching out to our colleagues Joe and Brittany in marketing and constituent services. Next slide. If you're not already on our newsletter, please join. That's the surefire way to hear grants updates. And there are other newsletters that you might be interested in as well. So please join if you're not already there. Next slide. If you have questions after the webinar, please reach out. Our information is on this slide and alongside the GOS2 webpage. Email all of us, myself, Catherine Frost, Crystal Sight, Jesus Guzman, and Takinia LeViscount. Please email all of us and you'll hear back from whomever is able to respond first. Next slide, please. And if you have any questions now, we'll take them.
Thank you, Kat. So I'm going to hang out for a couple more minutes. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I want to give attendees a moment to absorb all the information. If you think of new questions, don't hesitate to utilize the chat. I'm going to hang out until 12:30, so for about 5 minutes. Folks, just a friendly reminder as well. It's okay if you don't have questions at this immediate moment. Obviously, this is not your only time to ask questions of staff. Do keep in mind the following, though. My staff wants to help. I want to help. We are monitoring multiple funding opportunities. So that means if you think of a question later, you want to give yourself wiggle room for when you need the answer. So we are telling constituents that it can take us up to 3 business days, that's 72 hours, in order to respond to questions. So just keep that in mind, and I want to thank you for your patience during this busy time of the year. We appreciate you. So I've got a question here in the Zoom. The SM system will only allow submit if all documents and areas are completed. Is this correct? Who would like to answer this question? I don't have to be the person to answer it. Crystal or Kat, would you like to tackle it?
Sure. SM Applied does present errors that prevent you from submitting if there's something missing. We do still go through a check to make sure everything is accurate. You could mistakenly upload the same document twice, and SM Apply might not catch that, but it will check, is there an upload in a required field? And if not, it will give you an error.
Thank you, Kat. There's another question here. The attendee states, I didn't catch this piece. When will the panel reviews begin? Thanks. So, a friendly reminder again to all attendees, you will get the webinar slides. We will also place a recording of this webinar on our website in the near future. So, if you miss something, know that you'll be able to listen to the full webinar soon, and you'll also get the slides. But what I explained is that the panel date has not been confirmed yet. Eligible applications, sorry, all eligible applicants will receive an email notification when the panel date has been confirmed. And you will also receive the time frame and an estimate for when we think proposals will be discussed during that day. You'll also get a code of conduct. Panel meetings will occur in the spring. I believe that we do have an estimated timeline in our guidelines so that you can plan ahead. But in the guidelines, we have listed that we anticipate the panel to occur in May. The exact date in May has not been confirmed yet, but assume that the panel will occur in May, and it's a virtual panel, so that means that you can listen to it wherever you are most comfortable. Okay, folks, it's 12:30. We want to thank you for taking time to attend this webinar. Again, a friendly reminder that if you came in late or missed a section, you will be able to view the full webinar again soon. We'll place it on our website probably by the end of next week. You will get the slide deck, though, soon as well. And please, please, please submit your letter of intent if you have not done so yet. We wish you a lovely Friday and a beautiful weekend. Take good care. Bye bye.